Last week, my guest was restaurateur Brad Johnson, and we didn't get it. And we talked about food. I'm a foodie. We talked about food, but this week we're going to talk. We're going to take it a little down and talk about something serious. The attacks that happened at the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo has been all over the news, and I've been so disappointed with the media coverage of it, because we discuss in the West, we discuss issues in the media in a superficial, inaccurate way, in my opinion. And I think I'm accurate, because there's always more than one perspective. And in fact, we always discuss it as one perspective, that there are these Islamic terrorists that we must fight this war on terror, and that's the only way to perceive this. There are billions. I don't know how many billions. My guest is going to tell me, because he's Muslim. How many billions? I think 1 point something billion Muslims in the world, and we're talking about a handful. We've labeled them Islamic terrorists, and we don't. And the argument in the media, and I'm talking about NBC, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, it's always the same narrative. It's always the same narrative. The narrative is these Islamic terrorists are attacking us because why? They resent us for our Western values. They're jealous because our Western values. And how long has this been going on? At least a decade. Were we not lied to about WMDs in Iraq? We know that's not true, right? I mean, I think some people still believe that there were WMDs in Iraq. Some people still believe that, but most of us who follow these issues closely know that we have been given the wrong narrative. We are given half-truths, untruth, distorted information from the media. And all of the cable and mainstream media, even alternative media, they keep presenting the same narrative, and we're not learning anything new. We're not learning anything new. And that's why I try to bring a different perspective to listeners to the media, to listeners to KCAA, to listeners to my show, the Kathleen Wells Show, because we're not winning. We're not analyzing this correctly, because it's the same thing over and over. What is that expression? If you do the same thing over and over and expect different results, what are you? So it's like the American people, Western people, the masses, we're idiots because we're not getting a different perspective. We're always getting the same perspective. Day after day after day when you turn on your TV. So anyway, like I said, I'm delighted to have as my guest Asghar Bukhari. I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly. Asghar Bukhari. He's a Muslim, and he writes about issues that impact the Muslim community worldwide. He is a political activist, a campaigner for Muslim rights, a blogger, and an analyst on terrorism. He appears in the media. I don't know if he appears. We're talking to him. He's calling from the UK. So I don't know if I don't know what type of media he goes in, probably in the UK. But he's here now today with us in the West, in the United States. Well, the UK is the West, but you know what I mean. He's here talking to us in the United States because KCAA listeners, they want to know what's really going on. Because when they turn on their TVs or their radios, they know, oh, well, this isn't the real story. This isn't the real narrative. This is some made up stuff, so that we can just keep invading these countries in the Middle East. And so we can continue to fight Muslims in the Middle East for what? For what? What's the purpose? Why are we doing this? American soldiers being sent overseas to the Middle East to fight for what? A lot of people ask, when American soldiers went to Iraq, did they die in vain? When they went to Afghanistan, did they die in vain? Because here we are we're starting another war on terror. I mean, it's never left us. We're ramping up. We want to invade. Well, Israel wants us to invade or to start a war with Iran. Do we want to do that? I mean, are we in a state of perpetual war is the question? Is it perpetual war that Americans want? That's the question. So let me bring on my guest, Asghar Bukhari. He's calling from not from the Middle East, he's calling from the UK. Hi, Asghar. Welcome to the Kathleen Wells Show.
Hi, and I'm very happy to be on.
Well, I'm happy to have you. And, I read a few of your articles. I was so happy to see a different perspective presented because you get the same perspective over and over and over in the Western media. It's like we're beating our heads up against the wall. I mean, to not offer a different perspective is a failing of the American media. So I'd like to offer a different perspective. And as I said, you talk about these issues, you write about these issues. And in fact, I read two of your articles that I was very impressed with. One was titled An Uppity Muslim in a White Man's World. And the other article is The Creation of a Muslim Colonized Muslim Slave. The creation of a Muslim. What is the title? The creation of a
colonized Muslim slave.
Exactly. The creation of a colonized Muslim slave. Well, let me ask you, give us your perspective about the attacks in France at the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo office. Give us your perspective. Was it linked to our foreign policy or not?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. In fact, every single attack by a Muslim on a Western target, all terrorist attacks at least, are always linked to foreign policy. And that's a fact. It's not just my theory or I'd like to say it, but the terrorists themselves make it very, very clear in their videos, in their letters, and if they fail to carry out the attack when they're arrested, that the reason why they do these things is due to our foreign policy. One of the terrorists in France who gunned down 12 people in France just recently. When he was arrested initially for terrorism charges on a different matter, and they said, well, what's radicalized you? What's made you so angry that you want to carry this out? And he said, by seeing what America did to Muslims in Abu Ghraib in Iraq. So it's always linked to foreign policy. Whatever you see around the Muslim world is linked to foreign policy. Sadly, our politicians like to tell the average white guy out there that it's to do with our religion. Our religion makes us crazy. I would argue that the facts prove that it's their bombs or our bombs that make Muslims crazy.
Yeah, and in fact, the Muslim who attacked the Jewish or the patrons in the Jewish market. He stated, I saw this on CNN, he stated, because they had like a cutout to him being interviewed by a French reporter, and you saw this cutout on CNN, and then you had the full screen with the CNN reporter. In the cutout, you could see the words that said, Palestine. I did this because of Palestine. But the reporter at CNN didn't mention that. He presented it as if the guy was merely going to the kosher market because they were Jewish. That he was attacking them because he hates Jewish people. It had nothing to do with Palestine. That bothered me because
which is the way they portray it. They portray it as if it's an anti-Semitic attack, whereas in fact these type of attacks aren't linked to anti-Semitism. They're linked to Israel's awful, bloody suppression of the Palestinians.
Exactly, and yet that's never made clear to the American people. So the American people think, in other words, this is how I see it now. The media, those in the media are basically creating or dispersing the narrative of those in power, those who control the status quo. Those who are because the media is supposed to be for the state. For the state is supposed to inform the people, but they're not doing that job. They're not informing the American people. They're just reiterating a policy that's coming out of the State Department.
Absolutely. The media was supposed to shine a spotlight onto power. To give those who don't have power and to the account to give them the power to hold those far more powerful than them accountable. But in fact, it's the other way around. It's almost now a tool for those in power to shine a spotlight on those who have no power at all and who have no power, who are at the bottom of the heap, and to push through the elite's agenda. So yeah, absolutely. And this is extremely frightening and extremely scary, because it's not just in America, it's throughout Europe. For the first time, you're seeing a media that almost is completely enslaved by political interests and corporate interests. It has no concern at all for the little man.
Yeah, no concern. So, everyone kept saying, je suis Charlie. And also they were talking about in Europe this issue, and in France, even here in America, this issue of freedom of speech. I know here in America we have the First Amendment, the Constitution, the First Amendment for freedom of speech. But in Europe and in the UK, you have no freedom of speech. Talk about this issue of freedom of speech. Why are they talking about it as if it exists in Europe?
It doesn't exist at all. It's hypocrisy. It's a way of making the average man turn against Muslims. They need Muslims as their enemy, and because they need to carry out war against Muslim countries, and they can't have the average Englishman or the average Frenchman or European thinking or having some sympathy with us. So what they always do, and this is, history proves this, is they demonize that other, and then they suppress. They have the kind of license to go around killing, murdering, bombing, invading whoever they want. Look how they did it to the black community. What they did is they first made them, white people believe that they were inferior. They were animals. They were savages. They were unable to, look after themselves. They were violent. And so all of these things created an image in the average man's mind that they had to be dealt with in this awful manner. They had to be enslaved. They had to be chained. They had to be killed or brutally suppressed whenever they tried to free themselves. And no one had any sympathy for them. Neither did they have any sympathy for the Native Americans when they were ethnically cleansed, 100 million of them, in the most brutal, barbaric fashion. People weren't sad for them. They thought that they were the villain. Equally now, you see the Muslims. We are the new villain, and they have had hundreds of years of practice on how to create and make people believe that the downtrodden and the oppressed are the evil, wicked force, and they're doing that right now. So, the proof in the pudding is this. I know some of your listeners might say, well, hold on, that doesn't smack true. Well, there are, there's more to it than this guy's saying. But if it was about freedom of speech, let me tell you this: the French state has tried and convicted a rapper for insulting Napoleon. Now, so one rule for them: so you can't insult Napoleon, a dead person who France reveres, right? But Muslims are supposed to be okay with them insulting the Prophet. One rule for them and another for us. If you insult the French president, it's an illegal offense. So again, they're people that they revere, that they won't allow you to insult. They pass laws to protect. But a Muslim, he's seen, when he gets upset about someone that he considers important to him, then it's because we are savages and we don't fully understand freedom of speech. Europeans understand it, but these savages coming on our doorstep, they don't fully get freedom of speech. No, these people themselves don't believe in freedom of speech. The only reason why they talk about it is to highlight or to make ignorant people believe that they are somehow superior than these Muslim savages. Muslim savages don't fully understand it. And off the back of that, by demonizing the Muslim community, they can carry out their awful barbaric policies around the world, which they are currently doing.
Mm-hmm. And this is so clear to some people, and it's not clear to others. For instance, even in Europe, it's like blindingly not clear to others. And I don't know who these others are, but to me, it's just logical. You just need a few instances of something to finally snap out of it and say, wait a second. I see this double standard being applied. But a lot of people, I don't know what's wrong with them. They're not thinking people. For instance, you can't even talk about the Holocaust in Europe. And in fact, people have been arrested for discussing the Holocaust. What happened to freedom of speech? How can it selectively apply to some things and not others? That's the point. Don't people get arrested for discussing the Holocaust in Europe?
Yeah, and in some states, they definitely do get arrested. And I think that highlights the point. When Europe finds something offensive, then they legislate, right? Rightly or wrongly. But when it comes to Muslims, they expect us to just take it on the chin. Why if you don't like it, why don't you understand freedom of speech? They themselves, I come back to it, don't believe in freedom of speech and never have done. Yeah, they arrest Muslims. There's laws being passed in the UK where they're asking nurseries to spy on toddlers, Muslim toddlers, because they might be saying something that's extreme, and then they will take those young children, 4 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old, away from their parents because they're now on the path to radicalization. So this type of draconian Nazi-like type of a state mechanism against Muslims is moving. Laws are being passed against Muslims like that to snoop on young Muslim children, and then they have the cheek to lecture Muslims about freedom of speech. It's a joke. Yeah, so you can see why Muslims feel that the whole thing is just manufactured by hypocrites. We don't buy it, and we sadly the thing is Muslims are scared, so they haven't spoken up as much as they should do. But we in our hearts we feel it's a disgusting lie that's been told to the Europeans.
Well, when I read your article, An Uppity Muslim in a White Man's World, you almost sound like you're talking about black folks in America. And when you just talked about Muslim children, toddlers being scrutinized for their language, they criminalize young black kids in America. We're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about your article, An Uppity Muslim in a White Man's World. I love that title because I'm definitely an uppity black woman, no doubt about it. So I love that, no doubt about it. So I'm speaking with Asghar Bukhari, who is a political activist campaigner. You got to read his articles. It's so incisive. It's so insightful. It's accurate. I love it. Asghar Bukhari, we're going to talk about his article, An Uppity Muslim in a White Man's World, after we come back from the break. We'll be right back. Back. The Kathleen Wells Show. I'm your host, Kathleen. My guest today is Asghar Bukhari, who's a political activist, campaigner for Muslim rights, blogger, and an analyst on terrorism who appears in the media to discuss issues relating to Muslims worldwide. The issue is, you just say Muslim in the Western world, and people are like scared out of their minds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's guilt. It's guilt. It's guilt for what they've done to the Muslims. I learned that I've learned a lot from Malcolm X. Malcolm X used to say that white people were scared of black people, and they always used to talk about how frightened they were of black people. And he said it's their guilt that's talking. And all these years later, having read that amazing book, I realized it was the same thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I spoke with you before our interview, and I know that Malcolm X is one of your heroes. And, I'm familiar. I love Malcolm X. And I know, and I've read his material, his works, and I've watched his videos, his interviews. But, I was saying, to the younger generation in America, the younger black generation, they like Tupac. You know what I
Yeah.
Tupac is like so profound. They don't. It's kind of
Tupac's okay, but he's nothing compared to Malcolm. Malcolm's the real deal. He's the pinnacle, the king. If anyone wants to change their life or really think about things, if you haven't read that book, then go back to sleep. Nothing's going to change. He's one of the most amazing men that God put on this earth, and he's woken up absolutely millions of people right around the world.
And in fact, you mentioned to me that many Muslims in the UK actually, in fact, what was that example you gave when you said they arrested someone and the evidence that he was guilty was the fact that he had Malcolm X's autobiography in
yeah, so many Muslims in Britain, and not just Britain, or throughout the world, but it's little known, but Malcolm X is a Muslim hero for obvious reasons, as well as a black hero. Yeah, And in England in particular, he is like a guru. He's like the one that people say, well, Malcolm X would have done it like this, and they actually will insult each other by calling each other Uncle Toms if they Uncle Tom on television. Yeah, so they use his language, borrow his language. I myself borrow his language. If I see someone on television who's Uncle Tomming, and I get a chance to debate him, I will call him an Uncle Tom. Now, this is language straight out of Malcolm X, and our thought patterns, the way we think, the way we look at the world, is shaped so much by that great man. So he's very alive in Britain, and very and used by Muslims to view the world. And it's what started to happen is the police started to pick up on this and say, well, hold on, these politically conscious people, these people who aren't shining shoes and ain't ready to buckle down and just act slavishly, cowardly in front of the state's kind of oppressive policies, they all seem to be reading Malcolm X. They all seem to be talking as if they're Malcolm X. And so what happened is one of these guys got arrested, and what they tried to do is use Malcolm X, the autobiography, as evidence against him in court to say, look, he's a terrorist. Look, he's reading Malcolm X. So, the case fell apart, but it just shows the power of Malcolm X in the Muslim community and how much we love the guy, but also how much the state still fears Malcolm X after all those years after his death.
But it's not the same here in the States. As I said, the younger generation, they think Tupac's all that in a bag of chips, and they've missed Malcolm X. And even when Malcolm X was alive, everyone was like, oh my God, Malcolm X, scary Malcolm X. It's Martin Luther King that we must quote. And even in the media today, when they quote Martin Luther King, it's like taking it out of context, as if, a lot of conservatives, even conservative whites will even say, Martin Luther King said it's your character, not your skin color, that matters. That's the only thing they know. Your character. Character. It's not about color. It's about character. But they don't go deeper than that. They don't dig deeper than that. But hey, Martin Luther King is one thing, but I'll tell you, when Malcolm X was alive, he was seen as radical, revolutionary. And it was a big divide and debate about whether or not the black folks in America should adopt Malcolm X stance, being aggressive, or should they be more, moderate at like Martin Luther King. But you know what? For me, the proof is in the pudding. We should have gone the route of Malcolm X. Because you know what? We're back to square one, where most black men in America, a significant number of black men in America, are massively incarcerated, or they are on probation, or they're a felon, or they're in jail. You know what I mean? It's just too dramatic. The numbers are too stark. It's too clear. So most people don't even know what mass incarceration is like in America. You're going to prison, and it's a bunch of black guys and a bunch of Latino guys arrested for things like possessing a bag of crack cocaine. It's just too much. Yeah. Well, anyway, I could go on and on about it, but let's get to your piece titled "An Uppity Muslim in a White Man's World." Talk about that. One thing you write, you say that the supremacist ideology today finds its roots in both liberalism and conservatism. Explain that.
What people think is, and I myself used to think, was that there's right wing kind of white people, and they kind of hate on Muslims and hate on blacks and etc. And then there's liberals who kind of stand up for what's right. Yeah, and are kind of more, aren't as racist. But what I started to understand and analyze and see through my experiences was that, in fact, one just said it as it is, the right-wing nut, the kind of guy in your place might watch Fox News, yeah, or appear on Fox News. And the other, he didn't say it, but in his heart, he still thought he was better than you. And this supremacist ideology just took different forms throughout history. So in the past, this supremacy, it wasn't about white. When they ethnically cleansed the Muslims in Spain in the 14th century, 1 to 3 million Muslims were ethnically cleansed. They were Spanish, and they were white Spanish, so they weren't ethnically cleansed because they were white. But what happened is that the non-Muslim Spanish Catholics looked at these people as inferior. They said, we're better than these people. They're dirty. They're sexually promiscuous. Yeah. And all these kind of things that at that point was seen as a negative. And so what they did is they said, these people are other, these people are lower than us. And ultimately that led to their ethnic cleansing. Throughout time then, this supremacy that European ideology seems to have had for over 1,000 years, and way before then, I'm sure, morphed. So, for example, when this kind of Christian racism, started, this Christian supremacist, when God started to become a lesser factor, well, then science came into it. And then they said, well, God's not such a potent force in Europe. But this supremacist then simply took the clothes of science. And it said, well, we are science made us better than these savages. Science has proven that the white man is more superior and more like a man, whereas the black man, he's still like an ape. Yeah, and that's where they get their, caricatures of black people as apes. They're less evolved than us. We are more evolved than them, and science has proved us superior. And that's why they went around the world colonizing and killing so many people, because in their minds they had, again, the supremacist gene had morphed and said that it was their right. It was justified to go around and subjugate these lesser human beings, these people who weren't quite as evolved as them. And so all it is throughout their history is, it doesn't matter whether the supremacists took the clothes of color, or whether it took the clothes of science, or whether it took the clothes of religion. Whatever the clothes it wore, really the driving engine was these people thought they were better than everyone else. And this thing that made them think they were better than everyone else ultimately led to the others being murdered, butchered, killed, or worse. Yeah. So what I started to realize is, especially as Muslims are becoming increasingly attacked within Europe, I started to realize, my word, nothing's changed, because I started to, as I read my history, as I read Malcolm X, as I read Frederick Douglass, as I read Muslim history, and I read the awful ethnic cleansing of both the Bosnian Muslims and the Spanish Muslims back down into the 14th century. Then I read how they massacred the Muslims in the Crusades, and I read their literature, and I started to think, my God, the one common thread is they think they're better than us. They think that they are somehow superior. And that's why I wrote this article, because I thought Muslims don't understand this. Muslims are an educated underclass, and they don't really know, they need to stop apologizing. They need to stop blaming themselves. Nothing they do can make these guys happy with them. Nothing. They could tap dance, they could shoe shine, they could do whatever they want, but they will never be accepted, because they never will be seen as equal.
That's right. And it's the same. As I said, when I read your articles, it's like you're talking about black folks in America, because it's the same. In other words, what you're saying is that white supremacy, and we're not talking about the KKK version of white supremacy. We're talking about this notion that this is a system of white supremacy. We're saying that this notion that all things whiteness is superior. It's
absolutely
whiteness is the standard to which everything else is judged and assessed. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about people wearing hoods riding around. That's just some explicit form of, white supremacy.
Yeah, that's a more honest form. At least they were honest about their hatred. Everyone else ain't so honest. They just hide it. And we're using the word whiteness and white, but in fact, they will this feeling of being superior, even if they said, well, no, I don't care about color. But what they do is they express it. They still think they're better, but they express it in their other thing. Oh, our values. It's not. I don't think I'm better than you because you're black. I think I'm better than you because your values are different, and you don't fully understand our great values, our liberal values. You look how they're talking to Muslims. You don't understand freedom of speech, as if only some white guy understands freedom of speech, because Muslims can't understand stuff like that. I mean, what are we? We Martians. We're human beings. We understand things. We got a brain. God gave us, 2 arms, 2 legs, and something to think about. What makes you so special that only you can understand that value? Yeah, and so this kind of liberal values is the new way of their supremacy. You see, they've taken off the clothing of color because Malcolm X, beat the crap out of them on that, and they lost that debate. And so they're now they're naked again. So they took a new form, and that new form was their new liberal values, or their so-called Western values.
Democracy, we're better. Yeah, well, it changes when it's found out, like you just said, like the emperor has no clothes, it changes form. And this is what Michelle Alexander talks about in her book, Mass Incarceration, the New Jim Crow. You had slavery, you had Jim Crow, you had the convict leasing, now it's mass incarceration. But overarching issue on top of all of this is always white supremacy. It's all So when mass incarceration is gone, it's going to be something else. It's like the war on terror now. It's something else. But it's always underlying this overarching thing, white supremacy. But a different form. A different form. I love it. When we come back from the break, Asghar, we're going to talk about your other article. Tell me the name of your other article.
It is The Creation of a Colonized Muslim Slave.
Oh, okay, I put Muslim in there too many times. The creation of a colonized Muslim slave. We're speaking with Asghar Bukhari, who's a political activist and campaigner for Muslim rights worldwide. And, when we come back from the break, I also want to ask you, in the UK, what media outlets do you have access to? Don't let me forget to ask you. We're going to take a break. We're going to come right back with Asghar Bukhari. This is the Kathleen Wells Show. I learned something, that Malcolm X is living and breathing in the UK. This is so fantastic to me. His ideas are alive in the UK with Muslim people. Talk to me about that a little bit, Asghar. Well, you just did. Instead of talking to me, I love hearing that. What I want to ask you now, you did tell us about how Malcolm X is living and breathing. What I want to talk to you now is about your other article, The Creation of a Colonized Muslim Slave. Talk to me. What does that mean exactly?
The Muslims, what I started to do is I analyze the Muslims. They're my community, so I analyze them. And I started to realize that they behaved in an abnormal way. They don't behave like a normal, what I would consider a normal community that was healthy, mentally, psychologically healthy would behave. Everything about them was odd. I make this comparison and I started to make the comparison between someone who was mentally free, psychologically free, and someone who was psychologically unfree. And I started to think like this after reading Frederick Douglass and Frantz Fanon. Obviously Malcolm X as well. I don't want to keep mentioning him, although I could mention him all day and never get tired. But and I started to realize that black slaves, what they did, Frederick Douglass, in his autobiography, it's an amazing book. Yeah. In it, he started to explain how they broke the black psychology, what they would do, the type of tactics they would use to break the mind of the black man and make him defeated and act in a certain way, so he would never challenge them. And what I realized with Muslims in the UK is that they were the same. They carried the same symptoms. And I started to ponder and reflect and think to myself, well, if they could do it to black people, if they could break them the way psychologically, mentally, they haven't lost those games, those tricks, and they must have done the same thing to the Muslims, and started to watch them and see why were they behaving like this. And what I mean by their behavior being odd is this: when I saw Muslims the Muslims are just killed, slaughtered from one end of the earth to another. From Palestine, they're ethnically cleansed, all the way through to Pakistan, where they're bombed by drones and killed by Secret Servicemen paid for by the American, or pushed the Pakistani army pushed into endless war on their own people. And so they're murdered and massacred like very few people on this in the history of this earth have ever been. Yeah, I mean, 500,000 children were starved to death under sanctions just in Iraq alone. In the history of Islam, 1,400 years, Muslims have never starved to death 500,000 children, and the West did that in just 10 years to Iraq. So I started to think, why aren't Muslims reacting? Why are they so passive about it? Why do they allow it to continue? How can you have so much carnage and never stand up for yourselves? Instead, Muslims apologize. They're called terrorists, and they go, well, we're not all terrorists. It's just some of us are terrorists. This is a kind of really weird way of talking. They're killing you. They're slaughtering millions of people, and all you're doing is apologizing for them finger pointing at you. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get my head around it. When I looked at white people, I saw that 9/11 was a classic example. When their people died, they built these massive monuments. People visited it. They talked about it constantly. Every year you'd have, a minute silence or whatever it is. They'd have memorials and lights shining into the sky. They remembered their dead. But we never remembered our dead, because we didn't even see ourselves as worthy of remembering. We weren't human enough. The life of a slave, he's supposed to be a slave. If he dies, no big deal. He's just a slave. So why should he be so upset about some slave dying? Because that's all he is. That's what he was born to do: die, work and die. He's nothing but an animal. And he sees himself as an animal. But a free person, they don't see themselves as an animal. What they do is they're shocked when one of their people die. How dare someone take the life of us, the free? It's psychologically unacceptable. And that's why America went to war and destroyed Afghanistan and destroyed Iraq. How dare these people do anything to us? We'll destroy their whole civilization. You can hear on Fox News the way they talk. The premises type of, we'll just go, they'll bomb them, we'll destroy them. Doesn't matter, women, children, they don't care. They're might, they're right, they're free. But a Muslim, he gets bombed. He gets kidnapped and thrown in a dark American prison. Up to 3,000 right now are dotted around the world. No one knows where they are. Their families don't know where they are. Yeah? And the Muslim's the guy who gets bombed. Muslims are the people who get invaded. The Muslims who get vilified, demonized by the press. Muslims are the most beat down people on earth. And the very people who are beat down are the very people who do nothing about it. They just shrug their shoulders as if no problem. When you go to the mosque, they don't talk about this. They'll talk about, how big your beard should be, as a good Muslim. Should you fast, to give charity? But they never talk about their suffering, their oppression. It's an odd thing for a human being to behave in this way. And I realized this was because we had been colonized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you say that Muslims are more concerned with what foot should go first into the bathroom, or what hand you should eat with, as opposed to remembering their dead, honoring their dead who've been slaughtered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's not normal, is it? It's not a normal behavioral pattern. It's not healthy. A human person with a healthy mind, society wouldn't think like that. Yeah, it's only when you see yourself as inferior that you behave in this way, as if dead people don't matter. Your dead people don't matter. That's it sounds almost like you just don't care because you're callous, because you're cruel or you're wicked, but it's not. They just have no value for themselves. And this is very interesting. In my article, you'll see that I say that a Muslim will get very aggressive with another Muslim. If I say this to a Muslim, what I'm saying now, right, he gets very aggressive. He's ready to fight me. And you see this in the black community as well. Black man is ready to fight another black man, very quickly. And but I don't know about the black people here, but I can say this definitely for the Muslims in the UK. Is he'll fight me without a drop of a hat. Yeah, get violent with me, get physical, get aggressive. But when it comes to the person who's actually killing, bombing him, whatever, then he's like a mouse. Then he don't say anything. Then he just head down and and cap in hand and doesn't do, never stands up for himself. And I thought to myself, why? Why are they like this?
Well,
Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, it is the same. That, I have Neely Fuller on my show, and he says that a black man cannot be a man in a system dominated by white supremacy. But, I think there are a few of us that try to speak up, that try to get into the media and express these things, like you and I, and we're beat down. We're called, like I'm called, the angry black woman. I'm angry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course I'm going to be angry. I'm angry about the injustice. Of course I'm going to be angry, and let me express it just like they expressed their anger on Fox News when those exactly.
Kathleen, Malcolm X said to someone when he said, why are you so angry? And he said, if you look at the condition of the black man and you're not angry, you're in a coma.
Exactly. But they try to make you feel like
that's the truth. Yeah. If you see the condition of our people and you're not angry, my friend, you're in a coma.
Something's wrong. And then a lot of people try to say, the angry black woman, you're angry. Well, I'm supposed to be angry. I'm supposed to be angry.
If you ain't angry, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, like, why aren't you angry, and why aren't you talking about? Because you've been beat down? Or you're in your sleep? You're absolutely right. But so I think a few, like you and I, we do try to express what's going on. Not all of us are in a coma. Some of us are awake.
I agree. Of course, not all of us. Yeah. And thank God for it. Yeah.
But, things aren't changing because, like I said, honey, white supremacy just changes its form in the next 20 to 30 years. It won't be mass incarceration to handle those black guys. It'll be something else. You see what I'm saying? I don't know what it will.
Black guys no longer. Someone will wake them up and say, "Why are you allowing this? Why are you allowing them to incarcerate you like slaves all over again?" Yeah, it's just a different form of slavery. And when they become politically awakened like this, then you'll see the media turn on them and say, what's radicalizing these black guys? What's making them so extreme? Why are these black guys turning to terrorism? It's just same media words, same manipulation of words to deny someone's rights, and then somehow cover the fact that they've made these people act in this way.
Right. Well, that's what's going on with the police brutality. In fact, I saw a group of young black folks went over to Palestine. What was going on in Ferguson, Missouri, and also what happened to Eric Garner in upstate New York. They are trying, this younger generation is trying to make something happen. But yet you see in the media them being demonized. Yes, they're being demonized in the media by most reporters. Some people pretend, we get it, but nothing's going to happen. Because the whole system needs to be overturned, toppled. The whole system needs to change. It's a structure that I don't know. I talk about it with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing on my radio program. The system needs to be changed. But until that happens, we need to just deal with our communities, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But you can't change the system if your community is asleep. You can't change anything if your people are not willing to stand up for themselves and bring about that change. Then nothing changes. Then you are alone, trying to wake up people that are too cowardly to wake up. Mm-hmm. You can't fight their battles for them. They got to fight their battles for themselves.
And you got to be aware. We're speaking with Asghar Bukhari, who is a political activist and campaigner for Muslim rights. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back from the break, I want you to talk specifically about how Islam is a tool for Muslims to use to find justice here on earth. How Islam is a tool for Muslims to find justice on earth. We'll be right back after the break. From the UK. He's speaking to us from the UK, and he is talking about, he's a political activist, and he speaks in the media in the UK about Muslim rights. In fact, tell me, Asghar, where in the UK, what access do you have to the media in Europe and in the UK? What access do you have?
Access is, I mean, it's not. I'm not someone who I just call the media and they have me on. It's when big incidents occur like this, then what they do is they say to the Muslim community, or find people in the Muslim community to try to explain it. And I am one of those people that come on television to explain what is going on. Now they don't like what I'm saying often, obviously. And maybe I'm a bit too blunt about it. I'm often saying things that the government doesn't want me to say and doesn't want people to hear, and neither does the right-wing media. But the fact of the matter is, what I say is right, it's correct, and it's backed up with reasoned argument. And so I managed to stay surfing about, despite what these kind of right-wing nuts trying to pull me down.
Sounds good to me. So we've only got 2 minutes left. I'm going to have you back on because I love what you're saying. So, but just briefly tell us how Islam is a tool, a mechanism that Muslims should use or could have used or will use to get justice on planet Earth.
God said in the Quran, he said that we sent our messengers, people like Noah, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, the prophets. He said we sent them clear signs and sent down with them the book, i.e., whether it was the Bible or the Old Testament or the Quran. And the reason why we sent it down was to establish justice amongst the people. So the core of Islam, the reason why it was sent down and why all faiths were sent down, according to Muslims, was that God was saying, use this to establish justice, to stop tyranny, to stop oppression. And that is your role, your mission on this earth. And I think that when the Muslims abandoned that one central mission and it became dogmatic, it was just about prayer or the certain type of clothes you should wear, that we lost the reason to exist. Islam started to fade from the revolutionary power that it brought to mankind, and so until Muslims get that back, until Muslims understand that their whole reason for being a Muslim is to establish justice on this earth, we'll never be free. And we'll never see injustice be rolled back, either from us or from anyone else in this world.
Okay, Asghar, I hear the music. Thank you. I'm going to have you on again because I love you as a guest. I love exploring these issues.
Love you too.
Okay, this is Asghar Bukhari. You're very, very welcome. We'll be right back next week with someone else, but I'm going to have Asghar on again. This is Kathleen Wells Show. Thank you.